今から日本語の講座を行います。 Okay, so hey everyone, this is Dogen here, and today I'm joined. Do you want to use your real name or not?
I don't know. I was wondering what name I should use.
Okay.
Should I use my real name?
My cousin. We'll just call you my cousin.
Sounds good.
So I'm here with my cousin who also lived in Japan for 6 years.
I was actually in Japan for 5 years, from about 2005 to 2011.
Okay, and where were you in Japan?
I was living in Kobe.
Okay, so I asked you guys on Twitter, making a Q&A about dating in Japan, reply with questions, nothing is off limits. We were talking about this a little bit earlier, but like Tinder, for example, that wasn't around when my cousin was living in Japan. So
Does anybody remember Mixi?
Yeah.
It was Mixi.
maybe I've been married since Tinder got popular and you left Japan since Tinder got popular.
Yeah.
So we'll be offering advice for practical dating advice in Japan for 10 years ago.
Sounds good.
Who pays on the first date? The guy. Alternatives to say Netflix and chill in Japanese. So this is good because we can talk about how Netflix and chill isn't a thing in Japan.
Yeah, it's really not a thing. If you've ever lived in Japan, you know that most people under the age of, let's say, 25 are still going to be living at home with their parents, with extended family. And typical Japanese houses are going to be really small anyway.
And the people that aren't doing that are people that have probably come from the inaka or countryside to Tokyo.
Yes.
And they don't have a lot of money, so they probably live in a very small apartment.
Very small apartment. So even if you wanted to hang out at home or you wanted to invite someone to hang out or at your home, it's almost completely out of the question, which is why they have love hotels.
Yeah.
So love hotels really provide that space where you can Netflix and chill, but also, I mean, like genuinely hang out with somebody. Huge baths, huge beds, karaoke machines, video games, lots of drink service and everything. And it's not that expensive for what it offers. My buddy, he would always go to Love Hotel. I never knew how he did it. But he always used this line. I mean, it's not really a line, but instead of Netflix and chill, he would say QK shiro. And QK shiro means like, let's take a break. But when you're asking the girl in that type of environment, I think the message gets across.
I can see that as being like, you don't want to be too direct in Japan when it comes to anything.
Right. You can't just say, hey, let's go to a love hotel.
It's a little bit too forward.
It's such a toughy situation. But if you do, if you are a foreigner and you are living in Japan or you're thinking about it, I would highly recommend go out for at least for the first 2 months of dating, no matter how much you want to just stay inside and watch a movie without any other intentions. When you ask the person that, unless they're like super into you and they really just want to get physical right away, they're going to take it to mean like
it's a little bit shallow.
A little bit too fast and a little bit too shallow. Maybe it's changed now with the advent of Netflix, which they didn't even have when I was living in Japan. It was like, come over and watch a movie.
Yeah.
But you, as a Westerner, because we hang out at home so much, we genuinely meant come over and watch a movie, mostly because I don't have any money.
Yeah.
I don't want to go out.
Yeah. Why is lying and cheating so common here, but not regular STD screening? If you watch Japanese TV, the instances in which celebrities get away with cheating without any repercussions, I think definitely seems to be higher than in the States.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of, particularly guys, Japanese celebrities, they're not ashamed of the fact that they've had tons of affairs. And
Right? Gotcha. I see what you mean. Okay.
So, I mean, there's definitely a lot of people that there's an affair and they break up and it's done. But there's also a lot where it's like they're married, but the guy's constantly cheating and the woman isn't. And it seems like that occurs more in Japan than it does in the States.
What I found is in Japan, a lot of couples get married not necessarily out of love, but out of necessity or financial maybe, or they still do omiyaike, arranged marriage.
Yeah, arranged marriage, yeah.
And what it feels like is there's the Japan that was 50 years ago where the guy does the work and the wife does all the house cleaning. And I don't know if it's intentional or not, but it's almost like the couple gets married, they're great, they have children, but once they have children, then the rest of the marriage kind of starts to split apart.
Yeah.
The guy will have he'll do overtime, and then after overtime he'll go to a bar with his coworkers, and after the bar with his coworkers his boss will say, let's go to a hostess club. Then he has to go to the hostess club, and then he'll get home late. Mind you, the whole time they're sleeping in separate beds. Typically the futon will be separate, so it's kind of like, I found that a lot of people just lose the love, the spark, whatever they might have had in the beginning. So it's kind of like, we'll stay together because we have a house together and we have children, but he does his thing, I do my thing.
If you want to come to Japan, that's a good thing to be aware of if you have very, I would say, traditional Western values and you expect to have very, let's say, active sexual life after marriage. Good to be aware of. We talked about Tinder a little bit earlier. Is it true that the Japanese use Tinder for other things than one-night stands? So
I don't know.
Yeah. My cousin left Japan before Tinder was a thing, and I was engaged. It's my understanding that there's a certain demographic of Japanese people that are under the impression that Tinder is a platform that's primarily used by foreigners.
Okay.
So I think that if that's true, which I don't know, it might be true that Japanese use Tinder as a way to meet foreigners, just to meet them and perhaps befriend them rather than create like a one-night relationship or whatever.
There you go.
Is there anything taboo in dating for Japan that's considered normal in Western countries, like having a wingman bail you out if needed? I would say public displays of affection.
Public displays of affection, absolutely.
You don't see people kiss in public very often, if at all. And like you would never see someone like French kiss in public or like sit on someone else's lap or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean in America at least, when we meet people, we run up to them, not run up, but we're like, "Hi, how are you doing?" and we'll give them a hug. But in Japan, you meet somebody at the train, especially like your boyfriend, girlfriend, you meet them at the train station, and all I've seen is just and
greetings in general are completely different. So there's a lot less skinship in public than there is in the States. How many dakimakuras have you dated, and what are your tips on getting a quality dakimakura in your life? Zero.
Don Quixote.
Yeah, go to Don Quixote. They probably have every kind you could actually want. Why do guys think nampa will actually work?
Does everybody know what nampa
means? So nampa is essentially hitting on someone.
It's the Western. It's just pick up. Just hit on. Nampa works. I mean, if you're going to hit on the girl, you're going to do it in whatever language you feel comfortable in, here or there. So if you're doing it in a really sleazy scumbag way, chances are low, just like anywhere. But yeah, if you're nice and you see a cute, person at the bar you want to go talk to, say hi. But if you're studying nampa like it's a science or something, then that's not usually going to work. Just, again, be yourself.
I forget what it's called. It's like a red pill or something like that in the States, where it's like... It's like alpha male thing, and there's like this whole like subculture that's all like about like
it's like a game or something?
Like how to be like an alpha male and like get women. And I think that there's a lot of women that only experience nampa from those type of guys, and that would probably be very obnoxious.
Gotcha.
But again, like what you said earlier, it's like if you're genuine, I think a lot of people would actually appreciate that, because it's, in many instances, whether or not you're looking to have a brief or long-term relationship, you might be in that bar subconsciously or very obviously because you want to meet people, right? This is a great question. Why do foreigners so often ask for the secret code, for the secret to cracking the code of dating Japanese girls, as if they're all completely uniform and somehow incapable of making themselves understood? So this goes back to what we went on earlier, where it's like, if you look at like certain parts of the internet, and you're kind of ignorant and you've never been to Japan before, it's easy to think that you'll be a god if you're a foreigner and you come to Japan.
A lot of people think that.
Yeah, but that's really not the case, and that'll become apparent very quickly if you actually come to Japan. Maybe they're only interested in you because they don't want to have an actual relationship with you.
Which is totally fair. I do have one piece of advice, though, for the secret code. The secret code is not anime.
Yeah.
Okay, so...
Oh, yeah, that someone else asked about that.
It's not anime. Anime is great, and we all love watching it, and it's really, really cool. And anime, while being popular in Japan, it's not as popular as you may think.
I actually think that Japanese... otaku anime culture has more of a stigma in Japan than it does in the West at this point.
It really does.
Yeah, it's not the Rosetta Stone for dating in Japan.
Cafes, though, are.
Yeah, cafes.
Go to a cafe.
Yeah.
Normal one.
As far as you're aware, are there any typical date activities that are unique to Japanese culture? Cafes.
Yes,
like what
cafes.
we just talked about.
Yep. Cafes has kind of, I don't know how many of you guys watching live in Japan or are thinking about coming to Japan, but cafes has more of
a date.
It's a date spot, and a lot of cafes try to be different and have like really cute scenery and atmosphere that make it fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like a cafe is like the default date spot, whereas in the States it's more like Netflix and chill.
Or dinner and movie.
Yeah. I think that's accurate.
Yeah.
How to attract a Japanese man, proceed to trap him to date me, and we can live happily ever after.
Most of the girls that I have known in Japan who have gotten married to Japanese dudes have had a pre-existing interest in the culture. I can't say that I've known anyone who has just gotten together. Yeah. But if they did, that's great. Yeah. I just don't know.
Realize that there's going to be instances that you see it as an obstacle and it's like, why is it like this? This is so wrong. It's just a difference in thinking. It's not an issue of right or wrong. Maybe this is interesting. What's the casual sex scene like in Japan? I think it's like anywhere in the world.
Anywhere in the world.
Yeah, if there's people anywhere in the world, including Japan, that just want casual sex.
I think the one difference between Japan and the Western world, at least, is that Japan has the hostess and the host clubs, the bars, and the people who frequent those clubs are typically looking for casual sex partner in that host.
Oh.
So they may be married or they may be dating somebody, but it's like you go there. You have fun with them, you give them lots of money, and then they let you sleep with them. So
that's interesting. Yeah,
we don't really have that.
Does having a car help?
I never had a car in Japan.
It's kind of weird because I do think that having a car can be a status symbol, but it's also a necessity in certain parts. So it's like if you have a car and you're in Tokyo, that might help because it's like, okay, this person is obviously doing well. But like
maybe
same person in like the inaka, it's like you have a car, okay, everyone has a car. It's more dependent on where you are in Japan. Hey Dogen, why J-Girls replying so late or always give cold shoulder? Please answer. My friend is depressed day by day and I need to help him.
Your friend, eh?
Your friend.
Be patient.
Yeah, be patient. Patience is always good with dating. There's so many differences in culture. Here's a perfect example. A girl that I dated a long time ago called me naive in Japanese, which kind of means like, it means sensitive.
Interesting.
It doesn't mean like you are sheltered. And I thought...
And you just, easy to be taken advantage of.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So she said I was naive because I think I am quite sensitive.
Okay.
And I don't have any problem mentioning that. But I thought she was saying that I was naive in the English context. And we got in a fight over it. And I was like, why are you calling me naive? And she was like, why are you calling me out for calling you naive? And I was like,
that's tough.
Hold on a second. And then like you realize like 3 days later, when you're on the verge of breaking up, it's like, that doesn't mean the same thing in English and in Japanese.
One time I was trying to ask if some girls, I was trying to nampa, if some girls wanted to come over and drink with us. And instead I asked if they wanted to, actually I didn't ask, I said, come drunk.
Yeah, I used that joke in one of my videos.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
It didn't go over
So the difference in that is, nonde kite, which is come drunk, and nomi ni kite ne, which is come over and drink. We're going to have a good time at, house.
Yeah, just come wasted.
The next time that you have a fight with your significant other, take a minute and say, what are we actually arguing about? Is it possible?
Good advice. Just
is it possible?
Slow down.
Yeah, that what's happening right now is that there's a cultural misunderstanding.
Yeah.
And that we're not actually fighting over this particular thing.
And that's totally fair.
What are the major differences between dating in Japan and dating in the States? So we talked about this earlier, but one of the things that we've both seen is that the realm of my friends and my relationship with them and me and you is kind of like two different areas. So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
There was one instance for me where I was usually working on a Thursday, but for this week in particular, I had the day off. And so I texted my girl and said, hey, I have the day off, hope you have a good day at work. And she was like, oh, I have the day off too. I thought, oh, perfect. Let's meet up. We can hang out. And she said, oh, no, sorry, I can't. I have plans today. And I said, oh, well, that's okay. Well, what are you going to do? And she goes, me and my friends are going to go to Universal Studios Japan. By this point, we had been dating now for 7 months. And for me, as a Western guy, when she said that, I was just waiting like, and you can come too? Or do you want to come? But it never actually came up. It never even came up so much so that I asked, can I go with you? And she said no. And it was like, and I said, oh, okay, well, are you going out with your girls? Is it like a special party for somebody or something? No, it was just her and her friends wanted to go Universal Studios. And I asked her why, and she said, well, my friends are my friends, and you're my boyfriend.
There's a concept in Japanese called kyotsukau, and it basically means being conscious of the people around you and trying to make it such that it's not troublesome for the people around you. And I think with that in mind, the way that a girl or a guy might act with their significant other would be slightly different from the way that they act with their friends. And that minor difference wouldn't be a big deal in the States, but it would be a big, because the notion of kyotsukau isn't a thing in the States. Everything is much more kiraku. It's much more relaxed.
It's like, hey, we're hanging out. You can come with us.
Yeah. But
come on, hey guys, this is my boyfriend.
Yeah.
He'll be with us today.
But in Japan, it's much more amplified. Those kind of like small differences in the way that people interact with each other. So it would feel maybe perhaps a little bit stressful if your significant other was with you and your friends, because you wouldn't know whether you need to pay more attention to the significant other or the boyfriend, and that again might be
like way too much work for us. But if that's how they, so I mean, just that is one big difference that we've noticed. So be prepared for that as well.
Potentially,
if they're not like just showing you around to all their friends and saying, hey, let's all hang out together.
This is interesting. How is the situation for Latinos over there?
I can't speak to that at all.
Me neither. Actually, I can, to a very, very minor degree. The majority of Japanese people that are interested in non-Japanese things are interested in the West. And when I say the West, I mean like most students that want to study abroad in the States. And I can say this with confidence because I work at a Japanese university and I work directly with Japanese students. That said, there is a significant minority of students that want to go to places like Mexico, Spain, South America.
Nice. Yeah.
So like one of my best friends from KO, his younger brother lived in Portugal for 1 year during high school, and he studied abroad for 1 year in Mexico. There's also a lot of Japanese people I found that are really into like Spanish food.
Yep.
Not Mexican food, but Spanish food. Yeah, it's basically impossible to get good Mexican food in Japan. Yeah. How do I let someone know I like them? I feel as though anything I've said has come across as friendly rather than romantic.
That's an interesting question. I think I like that one a lot. But one thing that I didn't know necessarily existed, even for adults in Japan, is the idea of a kokohaku.
Someone else asked about that as well. So
yeah, so kokohaku is when you confess, and that literally just means the confession of how you feel about that person. And for a lot of people, if you don't formally do the kokohaku and seriously, I like you, and just write it all out and get it, or get all of your feelings out there for them clearly, then they won't necessarily accept you as boyfriend girlfriend.
That's interesting. I think that's true.
It is really interesting. It's like you got to do the kokohaku, and when you do it,
that could potentially be in a lot of instances that last step before things get physical.
Yeah. Also, with Japanese language, there's like 5 different ways to say I love you. And like in Japanese is suki desu, daisuki desu, aishiteru, and itoshii. However, in my experience and what is on TV usually and in music and movies, Japanese people expect to hear suki desu.
Yep.
that's what you want to go with. Don't go with like daisuki. You know, it doesn't come across as natural. And I can remember when I was first learning Japanese, I was looking at it from an English perspective of like if ski only means like, and daisuki means like a lot, aishiteru means love, then freaking karaage aishiteru. You know, like I love Japanese fried chicken. Let them know your feelings, and at the very end, just be like, you know, in Japanese, 誰々のことを好きです。
が好きです。
誰々のことが好きです。
Also, real briefly, do you think that it's different? Do you think it's okay for girls to kokohaku?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. A lot of times the kokohaku will be in the form of a note.
If you write rather than speak, you can be more articulate. So if you really like someone and you want to express that in the best way possible, if you write it down and edit it, there's a good chance that you'll be able to express yourself in a better, more clear way than if you just never rehearse or never do anything and try and do it face to face in your second language. Not quite 100% confident in your language abilities and also be nervous from the kokohaku itself. Yeah. Those two, like, there's a synergy and then you just kind of break down and you're like, and then it's like supposed to be this really big moment.
How did it go?
Yeah, it's supposed to be this really big moment, and like you can look back on it and be like, that was like the the moment where we became official, and it's like this really like pathetic thing where like you failed dramatically. So the note might be a good option for a lot of people that are studying Japanese. 半年以上使っているのに、一回もマッチできない Tinder はやっぱスパムではないでしょうか。スパムでしょうね。Is there any benefit of being 外国人 or 外人 in Japan when it comes to dating?
There are Japanese people, who will go to the bar just to pick up foreigners. And they may like you for your skin tone. They may like you for your big nose. Whatever part of you that they find is so different than what they're used to, they will superficially like you. I don't know if it's a bonus or if it helps you, but I don't think that there's really that type of person in the West who will go to a bar specifically looking for that type of person, like completely superficial. But if you're a little bit shy and you find it difficult to go out and speak to people, foreign bars are actually, I mean, it's a pretty good option. They're fun, and a lot of people frequent it, and it's a good chance to meet someone.
This is actually a really interesting topic that I wanted to talk about really briefly.
What's up?
And it's kind of like foreigner on foreigner hate in Japan. There's like a lot of foreigners that don't like other foreigners being in Japan because they came to Japan wanting to be the rare person, and every other foreigner decreases their rareness, their uniqueness.
That is absolutely true.
So that might be good to be aware of, like if you're a foreigner and you go to a bar and you're thinking like, why is this other person like glaring at me or like, treating me...
Do your best to ignore all that.
Yeah.
Just be yourself, be nice. They're going to be who they want to be. And I mean, it's a waste of time.
Yeah. Who is more up for dating foreigner, Japanese guys or girls?
Both, 100% both.
Definitely a lot of Japanese guys that are into
when I was an exchange
foreign girls.
When I was an exchange student, I mean, half of my group was female, and they all got boyfriends.
There you go. And they were all of different backgrounds?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Why do Western men fetishize Asian women so often?
What I have seen is that there is the idea that Japan is still the country where the women wear the traditional Japanese shoes, the geta, and just slide around the house,
subservient.
Yeah, hands over hip, bowing all the time, with the man being the master. And I think a lot of guys fantasize more about that. I think they do that wherever the country was known for that. but it is completely different now.
Yeah, it's not like that at all.
Please don't come to Japan thinking like that.
Do Japanese have the stereotypes ingrained in them of love and etiquette? For example, all Englishmen are gentlemen.
Yes.
All Spaniards and Latinos are handsome and speak with an alluring accent. All French are romantic because they come from France.
I would say yes. In the same way that we have the stereotype to think that all Japanese women are like wearing the geta and all the men are samurai.
That's a really, really good way to explain that.
There's still ninjas everywhere.
A lot of that, for both sides, is subconscious. They don't realize what they want in a relationship is something that they've kind of created in their head, where it's like the self-fulfilling fantasy.
Yep.
But what you said, I think, is really, really good, where it's like they're both fantasizing each other. So yeah, I definitely think that stereotypes do exist, and they do affect the way that people think, the way that they perceive, they think relationships are going to go. But
however, typically though, not necessarily chivalry, but basic manners that Western guys should have, in my opinion. Japanese guys usually don't, like opening the door for the woman, letting her go first. Even with friends, that I opened the door for a girl, or I said, "Oh no, please, after you." Every single one of them was surprised and like, "Oh, ladies first," you know. They commented on that.
I've almost had a completely opposite reaction, where it's like, okay, again, this is like playing into those like stereotypes that we create in our minds, where it's like, I dated a Japanese girl when I was studying abroad, and I was probably projecting, okay, she wants me to behave like this stereotypical gentleman, chivalrous guy, right? So I tried to play into that, and I would always try and open the doors and like, you know, ladies first and do all that.
To the point of annoyance?
Exactly. It backfired. Maybe at first she was really happy that I was doing it for her, but after that kind of weared off, the novelty of that, it became less about her and more about the fact that anytime that happened, all the Japanese people around would see that happening, and then she'd kind of have to play down the fact that she was standing out because that was happening to her.
Interesting.
Is there a no foreigner policy to Japanese women? So do some Japanese women and men, they refuse to date foreigners?
I don't know if they refuse to date foreigners, but I've met a couple girls who don't prefer dating foreigners.
I've experienced that as well, where I've heard about friends of girls that I've dated that say that they could never date a foreigner.
Yeah.
So there's definitely some people that want to date a foreigner for the novelty or whatever the reason might be, but there's also other people that think, not for me. Now that we've answered basically a fair amount of individual questions, we thought that we could do kind of like ending advice for general relationships in Japan.
I would say not necessarily forget everything you know about Japan, but go to Japan with a completely open mind. Let the person that you are interested in or the person that you meet kind of be your guide to Japan, and then whatever their interests are, see if it melds with yours. Don't necessarily take what you think you know and try to tell them that this is the way Japan is, because you'll be in for a shock. Do a little bit of research in the city that you're in, and be yourself. I'll never forget, for me personally, I was a little bit of a late bloomer. And when I came to Japan, I had one girlfriend my whole life, and I was 21. So I'll never forget my first week as an exchange student. Me and some of the other exchange students went to a bar, or we went to a club in Osaka, Sazae. It's not there anymore. And we
Back in the day.
And we went to Osaka, this club, and I went to a bar to order a drink, and it was my first weekend in Japan, and this Japanese dude was next to me. He looked at me, and he said, "Whoa, you're so cool. How many girlfriends do you have?" And I was like, 0. You know, like before then I never even considered, what are you talking about? Don't let that go to your head. Because it's all superficial. You know, some people may stop you on the street, say like, "Wow, you're so cool. I want to take photos with you." Leave it at that.
That's really good advice.
Really, you're not all that, I promise. None of us are.
I would like to briefly talk about the homogenous thing that you touched on. Male-female relationships in Japan haven't changed dramatically in the past, 5 or 10 years. But I do think the rate of change in the culture in general is accelerating.
Okay.
And what I mean by that, for example, is I talked about this a little bit in my video with Chris, but it's like when I first came to Japan to study abroad, 2007, 2008, I was under the false impression that I would be the only foreigner that every Japanese person that I met
had ever met. Yeah.
And not only is this not true, it's a gross misunderstanding. And at this point in time, if you go to any major point in Japan, so what I mean by that is any city that's on a map, basically, of Japan, essentially every single person that you meet will have met literally hundreds of foreigners up until that point in their life. And not only that, but the number of Japanese students that are studying abroad these days has increased dramatically. So I think that there's also a misconception that Japanese people can't speak English. And I think that a lot of people in maybe their 40s and 50s and maybe their upper 30s as well aren't as good with English. But working at like the university that I'm at right now, it's very obvious that this is changing rapidly. And I think that there are more Japanese people that can speak English at level X than there are foreigners that can speak Japanese at the same level.
Perhaps.
Treat every single person as an individual and realize that Japan isn't what Kyari Pamyu Pamyu makes it out to be.
When you actually come and you see everything, it's so much deeper. There's so much to explore. Oh, it's a little bit harder to buy condoms in Japan than it is in America.